So we were going to talk about the tiara.
Were we?
Yeah.
I thought it said no.
I know, but I just think it would look so fabulous if you
Yeah, but
did.
I've only got little tiny tiaras. They're not really worth it.
The jeweler did not raise his voice. He did not need to. With one sentence, delivered across a polished table inside a private royal chamber, he transformed a treasured diamond brooch into a symbol of rejection. Queen Camilla stared at the document in front of him, then at Catherine. Within seconds, her chair scraped backward. The folder snapped shut, and she stormed from the room, leaving Charles, William, and the future queen facing a truth no one could soften. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles entered expecting order, not rupture. The Windsor Castle gathering was a private jewelry verification, a formal review confirming ownership of personal royal pieces after death. Camilla sat opposite Catherine while William remained beside his father, and the crown jeweler opened a sealed inventory as a senior royal archivist. The official responsible for preserving palace records watched closely. The answer came without ceremony. Elizabeth's diamond brooch had not passed into the working collection for Camilla to use as queen consort, the title given to a king's wife. It had been left personally to Catherine, Princess of Wales. The wording was precise. The decision was final. The silence felt heavier than any argument. Camilla's face changed at once. She asked the jeweler to read the line again, certain that future queen had been confused with the woman already seated beside the king. He repeated it slowly. Catherine lowered her eyes, placed both hands over the closed velvet case, and said she had never known the piece was meant for her. There was no triumph in her voice, only discomfort. The jeweler then revealed what no one expected. Elizabeth had attached a handwritten instruction to the bequest, a private gift named in a will, stating that the brooch must pass to the woman she believed would protect its meaning for the next generation. Camilla turned toward Charles. He looked down at the inventory and said nothing. That silence broke her restraint. Camilla drove her chair backward until it struck the wall, snapped the folder shut, and called the meeting an insult. Then she walked through the chamber doors without waiting for a reply. William watched her leave, but his attention returned to the archivist, whose finger still rested halfway down the page. The reading was not finished. A second paragraph remained, referencing an earlier confrontation involving Camilla and the same brooch. Her exit shocked the room, but the deeper wound was still sitting unopened inside the jeweler's folder, and Catherine was about to discover that the diamonds carried a history far more dangerous than their brilliance. To the public, it was a dispute over jewelry. Inside the family, it was far more dangerous. The brooch connected 3 women across 2 reigns: Elizabeth, who had guarded the monarchy for 70 years, Camilla, who had fought for acceptance beside Charles, and Catherine, who represented the crown's future. Each woman understood that royal jewels were never merely decorations. They were messages. And by choosing Catherine, the late queen had delivered one that Camilla could not ignore. Catherine remained beside William after the others had gone. The diamond floral brooch had been given to Elizabeth early in her reign, and later worn during moments tied to continuity, duty, and the future of the crown. That history mattered because the piece had come to represent more than beauty. It had become a quiet statement about who carried the monarchy forward when one reign gave way to another. Camilla understood that meaning better than anyone. Since becoming queen consort, the title given to the wife of a reigning king, she had viewed access to Elizabeth's private collection as proof that the institution accepted her fully, not merely as Charles's wife, not as a tolerated figure standing beside him, as queen. The brooch now threatened that fragile certainty. Catherine turned to William and admitted what she had been afraid to say inside the chamber. Accepting the piece could look like a public judgment against Camilla, even though she had never requested it. The princess felt gratitude, but guilt moved beneath it. William listened carefully, knowing that his wife had inherited not only a jewel, but the burden attached to it. Camilla returned alone to her private sitting room and removed her gloves one finger at a time. She placed them beside a framed photograph of Charles, then sat without speaking. Her anger slowly gave way to something deeper. She whispered that she had spent decades entering rooms where she was still measured against absent women, first Diana, and now Elizabeth. Charles carried his own secret. Months earlier, he had been informed through a private executor's letter that his mother had left Catherine one personal jewel. The king had not been told which piece, and he had chosen not to ask. Now that silence looked less like restraint and more like avoidance. William finally revealed what his grandmother had once told him in a recorded private family conversation, preserved by her secretary. Jewelry, Elizabeth had said, was a royal language. One future inheritance would expose a division the family had tried hard to hide. Catherine felt the question forming before she spoke it. Had Elizabeth chosen her because of succession alone, or had something happened between the late monarch and Camilla that made the decision personal? The answer lay years in the past, inside a private royal ceremony where Camilla reached for the brooch and Elizabeth stopped her before the clasp ever touched her dress. Long before the jeweler opened the sealed inventory, the fate of the diamond brooch had already been decided. It happened during a private rehearsal at Buckingham Palace, when Camilla believed the piece had been selected for her first major Commonwealth appearance beside Charles. Elizabeth arrived unexpectedly, saw the brooch pinned to Camilla's gown, and asked the dresser to remove it. The room fell silent. What followed became the hidden trigger behind everything that erupted years later at Windsor. Camilla had entered the rehearsal believing the choice carried approval. The Commonwealth reception was a formal gathering for representatives from nations historically connected to the crown, and her place beside Charles would signal growing responsibility. 2 royal dressers had arranged several approved jewels, but the diamond floral brooch stood apart. She selected it because Elizabeth had worn it during moments linked to duty and continuity. Elizabeth stopped near the center of the room and fixed her attention on the clasp. Catherine noticed the change immediately. Charles did too. The monarch waited until the senior dresser approached, then spoke with quiet certainty. Not that one. Camilla did not move as Elizabeth stepped closer. The queen unfastened the brooch herself, held it for one long second, and returned it to the velvet case. No anger crossed her voice. That restraint made the rejection sharper. Camilla asked why she could wear other family jewels, but not this piece, and the late monarch answered without hesitation. Some things do not belong to rank alone. Elizabeth explained that certain jewels were tied to trust, timing, and what came after the present reign. Camilla heard more than caution in those words. She heard a boundary. Charles tried to interrupt, but his mother closed the case before he could soften the exchange. Catherine remained silent at the far side of the room. She had not expected to become part of the moment, yet Elizabeth later asked her to stay after the others left. The queen placed the closed case between them and said certain royal symbols had to be protected until the crown was ready for their meaning. She never named Catherine as the future owner, but the message was impossible to forget. Charles confronted his mother privately that evening. In a documented account later preserved by her secretary, he warned that excluding Camilla would reopen wounds the family had spent years trying to heal. Elizabeth refused to change her decision. She ordered the brooch removed from the working royal collection, meaning the group of jewels available for official use, and returned it to her private vault. Weeks later, the monarch wrote the handwritten instruction that the jeweler eventually uncovered. The rehearsal had been the point of no return. Elizabeth had chosen Catherine. Years later, when that private rejection was finally spoken aloud, Camilla no longer faced Elizabeth. She faced Catherine, William, and a husband whose silence felt like betrayal. Camilla did not remain behind the closed door for long. Anger carried her back through the corridor before the jeweler's meeting had even ended. This time, she did not address the archivist or the king. She walked directly toward Catherine, stopped only a few feet from her, and asked the question that had been burning since the brooch was named. Did you know? The future queen's answer would determine whether this was an inheritance or a betrayal. Camilla dismissed the aide waiting outside and ordered the doors closed. The chamber changed instantly. A royal archivist, the official responsible for preserving and interpreting palace records, remained near the table, while Charles stayed at its head. William moved closer to Catherine because everyone now understood the truth. This was no longer about ownership. It was about trust, silence, and who had been protected from what. Camilla fixed her eyes on Catherine and asked whether Elizabeth had promised her the brooch during the Buckingham Palace rehearsal. Catherine answered carefully. The late queen had spoken about protecting symbols for the future, but she had never explicitly named the inheritance. She had learned the full truth only when the jeweler read the sealed inventory. Camilla refused to accept that answer easily. She said Catherine had remained silent while she spent years carrying the duties of queen, attending ceremonies, standing beside Charles, and defending the institution through every fresh wave of criticism. All that time, one of Elizabeth's most symbolic jewels had been deliberately kept from her. Catherine opened the velvet case, but did not touch the brooch. Her voice stayed calm. though the tension around her sharpened. She said she would surrender the piece immediately if it were only a matter of preference. But the handwritten instruction was a bequest, a legally directed personal gift, and Elizabeth's final wish could not be rewritten simply to make the room more comfortable. Camilla turned toward Charles and demanded that he override the decision. William stepped forward before his father could answer. He said no royal title, not even the crown itself, gave the family permission to erase a dead monarch's private choice. The future king's words landed hard because they removed every possible escape. Charles finally lifted the instruction and read the final lines again. Then he set his glasses on the table and spoke with the weight of a man choosing duty over peace. The decision cannot be changed. Camilla looked at him as though the deeper betrayal had only just begun. Catherine saw anger give way to hurt. William saw the same thing, and Charles knew his sentence had ended the argument while opening a far more dangerous question. Who truly had the authority to enforce Elizabeth's final wish when the reigning queen consort refused to accept it? The monarchy is built on ceremony, but this decision rested on something colder and more permanent: ownership. The brooch had never entered the sovereign's official collection. It remained Elizabeth's personal property, allowing her to choose its next guardian, without permission from Charles, Camilla, or the palace. Yet the most powerful person in the room was not the king, the queen consort, or the heir. It was the absent monarch whose handwriting still commanded them from beyond the grave. Sir Adrian Bell arrived carrying the original sealed letter. As senior executor, the official responsible for carrying out a person's private wishes after death, he held authority over Elizabeth's personal bequests. He explained that crown jewels belonged to the institution, but privately owned pieces could be given according to the late queen's signed instruction. No reigning monarch could redirect this gift. Charles took the letter and moved away from the table. He read it alone, his hand tightening around the page as every line forced him toward the same conclusion. Defending his mother's decision would wound Camilla. Ignoring it would betray Elizabeth. The king had spent years protecting his wife from public rejection, but now the threat came from within his own family. Camilla watched him return and asked whether decades of loyalty beside him counted for nothing. She reminded Charles of the ceremonies she had endured, the criticism she had absorbed, and the duty she had accepted without retreat. He answered quietly that her place beside him was not being questioned. The brooch, however, had never been his to promise. Sir Adrian then revealed the detail that changed the entire meaning of the letter. A documented amendment showed that Elizabeth had altered her instruction 3 days after the Commonwealth rehearsal. Her earlier plan had been to return the brooch to the general family collection, where it could be used by senior royals. Instead, she removed it completely and named Catherine. Catherine remained silent as he read the final wording. The princess was not described simply as the beneficiary, meaning the person receiving the gift. Elizabeth called her guardian until the next reign. The phrase tied the brooch to future responsibility, not present rank. It was not a reward. It was a burden carried forward. Catherine accepted the pen with a trembling hand and signed the transfer register, the official record confirming that ownership had passed to her. She returned the pen without looking up. Camilla reached for her own name card, removed it from the table, and placed it face down. She would not lend her approval to the moment. The signature made the inheritance official, but it also transformed a private wound into a palace crisis, and Camilla's refusal to accept the transfer began changing the family's plans within hours. By the following morning, the consequences were no longer confined to one room. Camilla's chair remained empty at a scheduled jewelry trust briefing. Her private secretary canceled an afternoon engagement without explanation. At breakfast, Charles read the same page twice and barely touched his tea. The brooch had passed legally to Catherine, but the emotional cost was spreading through the palace, and every absence now looked like a declaration of war against the decision. Palace staff received instructions to prepare the piece for transfer into Catherine's secure collection. A jewelry trust briefing, the formal meeting used to manage royal pieces and their public use, continued without Camilla, while her office suspended cooperation with an exhibition involving Elizabeth's private jewels. That mattered because the display had been planned as a symbol of continuity. Now it risked becoming proof of division. William saw the danger immediately. He warned Charles that every cancelled appearance would invite questions, and every unanswered question would harden into its own version of events. The prince urged his father to gather the family before public speculation turned a private wound into a national argument. Charles listened, but the king knew that calling another meeting would mean asking Camilla to return to the very structure she believed had humiliated her. Camilla sat alone in her dressing room as an aide presented 2 brooches for an afternoon engagement. She studied them briefly, then closed both boxes. She would wear neither. The queen consort refused to appear before the public decorated in jewels while pretending the most painful piece had not been deliberately placed beyond her reach. Charles entered without staff and shut the door behind him. Camilla told him that his silence during the jeweler's announcement had hurt more than Elizabeth's decision. In that moment, she had not felt like his queen. She had felt like an outsider being corrected before Catherine and William while her husband watched. Charles finally admitted what he had buried for years. Elizabeth had once warned him in a documented private conversation not to confuse protecting Camilla with shielding her from every disappointment. He had rejected the remark then, because he knew it would one day force him to choose between comfort and duty. Catherine faced a different choice. Advisors suggested that wearing the brooch quickly would settle ownership and project confidence. She refused. The princess locked the case inside her cabinet and said displaying it while Camilla was wounded would turn Elizabeth's gift into a weapon. William found her standing beside the locked door. Catherine told him avoidance would not heal anything. Only one private conversation, without Charles, advisors, or palace officials, could stop the damage. For the first time since the storming exit, she decided not to wait for the palace to manage the crisis. Catherine would go to Camilla herself. There were no jewelers, no executors, no king, and no future monarch standing between them. Catherine entered Camilla's private sitting room, carrying the diamond brooch in its original velvet case. She placed it on the table, but kept her hand over the lid. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Then Catherine made a choice that no legal document had required. She offered Camilla the truth, the dignity, and the private honesty the palace had failed to provide. Catherine had asked for the meeting on one condition: no aides, no private secretaries, no family members waiting nearby to shape what either woman said. A private secretary, the senior aide who manages a royal household schedule and correspondence, had initially resisted, but the princess insisted. If the damage had become personal, then the repair had to be personal too. Camilla agreed reluctantly. She expected a formal apology, perhaps even an announcement that Catherine intended to wear the brooch at the next public event. The queen consort had prepared herself for politeness, not honesty. Yet when the case was placed between them, she saw no triumph in the woman across from her. Catherine told Camilla she would never use Elizabeth's gift to weaken her position beside Charles. She admitted that hearing the truth in front of the family must have felt deliberate, almost cruel, even if the wording had been written years earlier. The princess did not defend the room. She acknowledged the humiliation. Camilla's anger finally cracked. She confessed that it had never truly been directed at Catherine. The deeper wound came from knowing Elizabeth had made a final judgment about her, one she could no longer challenge, explain, or repair. For years, she had believed time might soften every old boundary. The letter proved that one boundary had survived the late queen herself. Catherine then shared the final line of the handwritten instruction. Elizabeth had written that the brooch must remind its guardian that inheritance was not triumph, but obligation. A guardian, in this context, meant the person trusted to protect the jewel's meaning for those who came next. Camilla lifted the lid herself. She studied the diamonds in silence and understood at last that the gift had not been designed to erase the current queen. It had been entrusted to Catherine because it belonged to the monarchy's future, not because Camilla's present role meant nothing. Catherine proposed that the brooch return at a memorial event honoring Elizabeth, with Camilla standing beside her. The queen consort did not answer immediately. She simply closed the case with care, instead of pushing it away. Their private understanding changed the emotional balance inside the palace. But the family would soon lose control of the story when news of the storming exit reached the outside world. The palace had contained the argument for less than 48 hours. Then one image escaped: Camilla leaving the Windsor corridor with her folder pressed against her chest, her expression rigid, while Catherine remained visible through the open doorway beside the jeweler's table. By sunrise, the photograph was everywhere. The nation saw a queen walking away, and a future queen inheriting Elizabeth's diamonds, and millions began deciding what the moment meant before either woman could speak. A staff photographer had released the corridor image without understanding what it captured. Within hours, newspapers connected it to confirmation that Catherine had inherited Elizabeth's diamond brooch. Broadcasters called it a struggle between the present queen consort and the woman expected to become queen in the next reign. That framing mattered because royal jewelry often carries public meaning far beyond ownership. A single brooch could now be read as a judgment on two women. Camilla stared at the coverage as advisors placed the morning papers before her. She told Charles that decades of service had been reduced to one angry walk through a doorway. The Queen had attended endless engagements, defended the monarchy during hostile years, and stood beside the king through every public storm. Now the nation saw only rejection. Charles tried to reassure her, but Camilla pushed the papers away. She knew public memory could be brutal. One image, repeated often enough, could replace every quieter sacrifice that came before it. Catherine felt no victory. She watched headlines describe Elizabeth's choice as a final rejection of Camilla and ordered her communications team not to encourage that language. A royal communications team, the group responsible for managing official messages and press responses, had prepared lines stressing succession. The princess rejected them. She would not allow the brooch to become a weapon. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace as the evening news played across raised phones. One newspaper showed the corridor photograph beneath the headline, "Elizabeth's Final Choice." Some people applauded Catherine. Others accused the palace of humiliating Camilla in public after accepting her in private. A veteran royal commentator then delivered the sentence that changed the debate during a live broadcast. "The brooch did not choose between two women," he said. "It revealed the difference between holding the crown now and carrying it into the future." The words reached both households. Camilla heard them as another judgment. Catherine heard them as a warning. The palace soon confirmed that both women would attend Elizabeth's memorial service. Advisors expected separate arrivals, careful distance, and controlled smiles. Catherine had arranged something else. The world expected rivalry when the memorial doors opened, yet Catherine and Camilla were about to transform the brooch from an emblem of rejection into a final act of royal unity. The diamond brooch finally returned to public view beneath the lights of Elizabeth's memorial service. Catherine wore it exactly where the late queen once had, but she did not enter alone. Camilla walked beside her, composed and deliberate, while Charles and William followed several steps behind. There was no statement explaining the arrangement. None was needed. The woman who had stormed from the jeweler's chamber had chosen to return, not in defeat, but with a clearer understanding of what Elizabeth's final gift truly represented. Catherine and Camilla arrived together, ending days of speculation that the inheritance dispute had permanently divided the royal household. The memorial service, a formal ceremony held to honor someone who has died, carried unusual weight because every gesture would be examined. The brooch rested with Catherine as Elizabeth had instructed, while the queen consort fulfilled her complete ceremonial role beside Charles, without any loss of rank or dignity. Catherine paused before entering the antechamber, the private room leading into the main ceremonial space. She turned toward Camilla and asked quietly whether she was ready. The queen looked at the brooch, then adjusted the edge of Catherine's coat beside it. "Now I am." Charles watched the exchange in silence. William saw his father's expression change as the king understood what official authority had failed to accomplish. No executor, signed instruction, or royal command had repaired the damage. Reconciliation began only when Catherine acknowledged Camilla's humiliation, and when the queen stopped treating the future as a judgment against her present. Elizabeth's choice finally became clear. She had not left the jewel to Catherine as a weapon against Camilla. She had entrusted it to the future queen as a reminder that continuity must be carried with humility. The inheritance was not a trophy. It was a responsibility, demanding restraint from the woman chosen to receive it. Camilla accepted that wearing the crown in the present did not give her ownership of every symbol from the reign before her. Catherine accepted something equally important. Inheriting the future did not permit her to celebrate another woman's pain. One carried authority now. The other carried what would come next. Neither role required the destruction of the other. The storming exit had exposed the monarchy's deepest vulnerability, the fear that recognition given to one woman must diminish another. Their joint appearance rejected that fear. Camilla remained queen beside Charles. Catherine became guardian of Elizabeth's brooch. Both truths stood together. There was nowhere else for the conflict to go. Elizabeth's wish had been honored. Camilla's dignity had been restored, and Catherine had proven that the future of the crown would not be secured through victory, but through restraint. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.